The perfect stranger. The scent of autumn, leaves mixed with desperate ambition, hung in the air as I walked across campus. 3 weeks into my freshman year at Westlake University, and I still felt like an imposter. Back home, I was Stacy Miller, church choir soloist, honor student, daughter of the town's most respected dentist. Here I was nobody. My roommate's bed was already empty when I woke up. Jennifer was everything I wasn't, effortlessly cool, socially adept, and already part of a sorority. She left notes encouraging me to get out there. But the thought of approaching the gleaming, confident students who populated campus made my stomach churn. I clutched my textbooks tighter against my chest as I hurried past groups of laughing students toward my psychology lecture. They all seemed to move with such certainty, as if they had rehearsed their college experience long before arriving. My phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Hey Stacy, it's Madison from Psych 101. A few of us are hitting Club Azure tonight. Thought you might want to join. Dress cute, we know the owner." I stopped walking, nearly causing a collision with a skateboarder who swerved around me with an annoyed grunt. Madison Coleman had spoken to me exactly once when she'd borrowed a pen. Madison, with her perfect blonde waves and designer clothes, who sat surrounded by an equally perfect entourage. Madison, who intimidated professors with her confident answers and cutting questions. Why would she invite me anywhere? My finger hovered over the screen. I should decline. I had a paper due Monday, and my parents would be horrified if they knew I was considering a nightclub. Dad's voice echoed in my head. "College is where good girls go bad, Stacy. Remember who you are." But who was I really? Just a sheltered girl desperate to belong somewhere. "Sure, thanks for the invite. What time?" As I pressed send, something shifted inside me. Excitement, yes, but also a creeping dread, as if I had just stepped off a ledge without seeing how far I had to fall. "Are you seriously wearing that?" Madison's voice cut through my confidence as she stood in my doorway, flanked by Zoe and Tara. I looked down at my carefully chosen outfit, a modest black dress I'd bought specifically for formal events at college. I thought it was cute. I mumbled, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. "If you're attending a funeral," Zoe snickered, twirling a strand of sleek black hair. She wore a crimson dress that hugged her body like a second skin. "It's fine," Madison said with a dismissive wave. "Tara, lend her something from your bag. You brought options, right?" Tara, a petite brunette with wide hazel eyes, unzipped her oversized tote. "I think I have something that might work." She smiled sympathetically, but I caught the calculating glance she exchanged with Madison. 20 minutes later, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. Tara's silver dress was shorter and tighter than anything I'd ever worn. Madison had worked on my makeup, transforming my usually minimal look into something bold and dramatic. Zoe had curled my hair into loose waves that framed my face in a way that made my features look sharper, older. "Better," Madison declared, circling me like a curator evaluating a new exhibition. "Still a bit innocent. But men like that sometimes. Just stick with us tonight." In the Uber, they prepared me with rules I never knew existed. "Don't accept drinks you didn't see being poured," Tara advised. "Don't seem too interested, even if you are," Zoe added. "Men are like dogs. They chase what runs away." "And don't waste time on bartenders or bouncers," Madison said, applying another layer of gloss to her already perfect lips. "We're there for exec types, tech entrepreneurs, maybe grad students from good families. Azure attracts quality, and quality is what we deserve." I nodded along, trying to memorize these strange commandments from a Bible I'd never read. The rules seemed designed for a different type of person than I was, but tonight, I was determined to become whoever I needed to be to fit in. Club Azure pulsed from 2 blocks away, its blue neon sign casting an otherworldly glow on the line of people waiting outside. We bypassed them all. Madison simply approached the velvet rope, whispered something to the mountainous bouncer, and suddenly we were inside, enveloped by darkness, punctuated with strobing lights and bodies moving like a single organism to the thundering bass. "Stay close," Madison shouted over the music, but within minutes the crowd had separated us. I found myself adrift in a sea of strangers, clutching the vodka soda Tara had thrust into my hand before disappearing. That's when I saw him. He stood by the bar, perfectly still amid the chaos. While everyone around him shouted and swayed, he remained composed, watching the crowd with detached amusement. In the fractured lighting, his features seemed impossibly perfect. Strong jawline, high cheekbones, eyes that somehow caught every flash of light. He wore a simple black button-down that contrasted with his pale skin, making him look like he was cut from marble. And he was watching me. I quickly looked away, heart hammering. When I dared to glance back, he was still staring, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Behind him, I spotted Zoe approaching, her body language transforming into something feline and practiced. She said something to him, touching his arm with familiar ease. He looked at her politely but briefly before his gaze returned to me. Madison materialized beside me. "Who are you looking at?" She followed my gaze. "Oh, him." Something tight entered her voice. "That's Ethan. Don't bother. He's impossible. Zoe's been trying to get his attention for weeks." I started to protest. "He turned down Alexis Porter last weekend, and she's literally a model," Madison continued. "He's either gay or a psycho." She took a long sip of her drink. Probably both. I watched as Zoe's smile faded. She rejoined our group moments later, her expression sour. "Still an Ice King," she muttered. "I don't get it. Is he waiting for a literal goddess to descend from Mount Olympus?" "Forget him," Tara suggested, appearing with a tray of shots. "I found some finance guys with a table." Madison's eyes lit up. "Perfect. Let's—" She stopped, staring over my shoulder. "Don't turn around," she hissed, which of course made me immediately want to turn around. When I did, Ethan stood directly behind me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something earthy and unfamiliar that made me think of ancient forests and stone altars. "Would you like to dance?" His voice was surprisingly soft, almost melodic, with an accent I couldn't place. 3 pairs of eyes bored into me with varying degrees of shock and envy. Madison's mouth hung open slightly, Zoe's eyes narrowed to slits, and Tara nearly spilled her drink. I should have said no. Something in Madison's warning echoed in my mind, gay or psycho, probably both, but underneath the judgment was obvious jealousy, and something in me wanted that. Wanted to be the one who achieved what they couldn't. The girls who had ignored me, pitied me, or merely tolerated me were now staring with naked envy. For once, I was the special one. "Yes," I heard myself say, and then his hand was on the small of my back, guiding me to the dance floor. "I'm Ethan," he said, his mouth close to my ear to be heard over the music. "Stacy," I replied, trying to remember Zoe's instructions about seeming unavailable while simultaneously wanting him to find me interesting. "I know," he said with that same slight smile. My startled expression must have amused him because his smile deepened, revealing perfect white teeth. "Your friend mentioned it," he explained, though I hadn't seen Zoe say more than a few words to him. "You're not like them," he added. "You're new here. Freshman?" I nodded, wondering if my inexperience was that obvious. "From somewhere small, religious family, First time really breaking the rules, he continued, each word landing like a precise dart. You feel guilty for being here, but also exhilarated. Part of you is waiting for something terrible to happen because you've been taught that sin always has consequences. The dance floor suddenly felt too warm, too close. How could you possibly? I notice things, he said simply. Most people are tediously predictable. You're almost interesting. I should have been offended, but instead I felt a strange desire to prove my worth. Only almost. His eyes, which I now saw were an unusual shade of amber, lit with something like approval. A sense of humor, too. Unexpected. We danced for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Unlike the grinding couples around us, Ethan barely touched me, maintaining a maddening distance as we moved to the music. He asked questions that no one at college had bothered with, about my hometown, my dreams, my fears, and listened to my answers with unnerving intensity. Your friends are watching, he observed eventually. They seem concerned. I glanced over to see Madison, Zoe, and Tara huddled together, shooting looks in our direction. They're not really my friends, I admitted. No, he agreed. They invited you here as an accessory, someone to make them feel superior. I've seen them do it before. The truth stung, but it also relieved me to hear someone else say it. Would you like to go somewhere quieter? He asked. I live nearby. Every warning sign flashed through my mind. Don't leave with strangers. Don't go to a man's apartment. Don't separate from your group. My father's voice chimed in with scriptures about temptation and fallen women. But looking back at Madison's group, now openly staring, another voice whispered, wouldn't it be nice to be envied for once instead of pitied? Yes, I said, making my second life-altering decision of the night. As Ethan led me toward the exit, his hand finally resting possessively on my hip, I caught Madison's expression, a mixture of disbelief and something darker that looked almost like fear. I should have listened to that fear. Ethan's apartment was on the top floor of a renovated industrial building downtown. The elevator required a key card, and the hallway was eerily silent after the throbbing chaos of the club. Home sweet home, he said, opening a heavy door to reveal a spacious loft. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights. The space was immaculate and minimally furnished. Leather sofa, glass coffee table, abstract paintings that might have been bloodstains or flowers depending on how you looked at them. It's beautiful, I said, hesitating at the threshold. Please come in. He stepped aside. Would you like something to drink? Water, wine, tea? Water would be great. My mouth was dry from dancing and the unfamiliar vodka. As he moved to the kitchen area, I wandered toward the windows, taking in the dizzying view. Ethan's apartment was higher than any building I'd ever been in, making the city below look like a circuit board of lights and movement. Impressive, isn't it? His voice was suddenly close behind me. All those people living their little lives, thinking they matter. There was a coldness to his tone I hadn't noticed before. I turned to find him holding 2 glasses of water, one of which he offered to me. Thank you, I said, trying to ignore the unease creeping along my spine. The glass was surprisingly heavy, like crystal. A toast, he suggested, raising his glass, to new beginnings. I clinked my glass against his and took a sip. The water tasted slightly bitter, but I attributed it to the residual alcohol in my system. So, I said, desperate to break the sudden tension, what do you do? Are you a student too? I study many things, he replied vaguely. Currently, I'm most interested in biology, specifically reproduction. He moved closer, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered on my cheek, cool against my flushed skin. The miracle of creation. How something new comes from the union of complementary forces. I took another sip of water, larger this time to calm my nerves. The bitterness was stronger, almost metallic. That's interesting, I managed, the room beginning to tilt slightly. Are you in med school? I'm self-educated, Ethan said, taking my glass and setting it aside. Traditional institutions have such limited perspectives. They fail to see the connections between science and faith, between biological processes and divine purpose. The room swayed more noticeably now. I tried to step back, but found myself leaning into him instead, my limbs heavy and uncooperative. I don't feel well, I mumbled, black spots dancing at the edges of my vision. It will pass, Ethan assured me, his voice now different, deeper, reverent. The sedative ensures your comfort during the preliminary examination. Fear shot through me, momentarily clearing my head. I tried to push away from him, but my arms felt disconnected from my body. What did you give me? My words slurred together. A gift, he whispered, his perfect face now inches from mine. I've been searching for someone like you, Stacy. Do you know how special you are? How rare? His arms encircled me as my knees buckled. Through increasingly unfocused eyes, I saw the apartment transform. The modern furniture seemed to fade, revealing symbols etched into the concrete floor beneath us, spirals and triangles and shapes that hurt my eyes to look at. The walls, too, began to shift, panels sliding away to expose shelves lined with ancient-looking books and jars filled with things I couldn't identify. One wall opened completely to reveal what looked like a laboratory, sterile and white with monitors and medical equipment. The walls were lined with specimen jars containing preserved organs and malformed fetuses floating in yellowish fluid, their features twisted into expressions that seemed almost accusatory. Perfect blood type, Ethan murmured, half carrying, half dragging me toward the revealed room. Perfect genetic markers, a B negative with the CCR 5-delta-32 mutation, virgin womb, untainted by previous attempts at creation. He laughed softly. I've analyzed over 6,000 genetic profiles at the university's donation drive. I've followed 27 potential candidates. 3 died in preliminary testing. You have no idea how long I've waited for someone like you. His voice shifted to clinical precision as he laid me on the metal table. Hormone levels optimal. Endometrial lining 8.2 millimeters. Ovulation in approximately 37 hours. Perfect timing. Please, I gasped, fighting against the darkness closing in. Let me go. Let you go? Ethan sounded genuinely confused. But you're the answer to everything. The vessel I've sought for so long. As consciousness began to slip away, I heard him chanting in a language that sounded ancient and wrong, the syllables crawling across my skin like insects. The last thing I saw was Ethan's face above me, his perfect features distorted with rapturous joy, his amber eyes now glowing like embers in the dark. Sleep now, he whispered. When you wake, your true purpose will begin. I woke to the sound of mechanical beeping and the feeling of cold metal against my back. My eyes opened to blinding fluorescent light, so stark it took several blinks before I could focus. I was in the white room I'd glimpsed before losing consciousness. Now I could see it clearly. A laboratory outfitted with medical equipment, computer monitors displaying data I didn't understand, and rolling trays holding surgical instruments. The walls were covered with diagrams of female reproductive anatomy alongside occult symbols drawn in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. I tried to move and discovered I was strapped to a metal table, thick leather restraints binding my wrists, ankles, and waist. The silver dress was gone. I wore only a thin paper gown that crinkled as I struggled against the restraints. "Please don't exert yourself." Ethan's voice came from somewhere behind me. "The sedative can cause elevated heart rate and blood pressure if you fight it. I need you in optimal condition." He moved into my field of vision, transformed from the charming man at the club. He now wore surgical scrubs, a strange medallion hanging from his neck that depicted multiple faces merged together in a grotesque mass. His movements were precise and clinical as he checked the monitors beside me. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. "Please, let me go. I won't tell anyone, I swear." Ethan looked at me with something like pity. "You still don't understand what an honor this is." He placed a cool hand on my abdomen, his touch making me flinch. "This womb, your womb, will nurture the next step in evolution, the perfect union of human and divine." "You're insane," I said, tears spilling down my temples and into my hair. "Visionaries are often called insane," he replied calmly, preparing a syringe with clear fluid. "Noah was mocked for building his ark. Prophets were stoned in the streets. But time vindicates the faithful." He glanced at a monitor displaying what looked like my medical records. "Did you know your blood work from your university physical revealed a perfect immunological profile? I had to bribe 3 lab technicians to get those results. Worth every penny." He smiled, the expression devoid of warmth. "I've been watching you since orientation day, calculating your cycle, analyzing your pheromones, ensuring compatibility." His fingers traced a pattern on my skin as he spoke. "I stood behind you in the cafeteria line 16 times, sat near you in the library on 23 occasions, followed you home twice to assess your routine. You never noticed. No one ever does." He picked up a small leather-bound notebook and flipped through it. "You're the 8th girl this semester I've evaluated closely. The others were inadequate, wrong blood type, hormonal imbalances, genetic markers for resistance." He shrugged. "Your friend Madison was quite promising physically, but her genetic screening revealed traces of autoimmune predisposition. Unsuitable." "Madison? You tested her?" I managed, the room still spinning. "Oh, I test all attractive candidates," he said casually. "Buy them a drink, take a hair sample, sometimes saliva during a kiss. Simple enough to run basic analyses. Madison was quite eager, you know. They all are." His smile was cold. "You should have seen her face when I walked away after our date. Devastated. She's been trying to get my attention again ever since." He inserted the needle into my arm with practiced ease. "This will prepare your system. The hormonal balance must be perfect for implantation." "Implantation of what?" I asked, though part of me already knew, already sensed the horror awaiting me. "The seed," Ethan said, his eyes glowing with fervor. "Not fully human, not fully divine, but the bridge between worlds, the child who will open the way for what comes after." As the injection spread ice through my veins, I thrashed against the restraints, managing to loosen the one around my right wrist. In a moment of desperate clarity, I ripped my arm free and clawed at Ethan's face, my nails drawing 4 perfect lines of blood across his perfect cheek. He recoiled, more surprised than hurt, and I took the opportunity to unbuckle the strap across my waist. But before I could free my other limbs, Ethan recovered, grabbing my wrist with bruising force. "Remarkable spirit," he said, sounding genuinely impressed as he forced my arm back into the restraint and tightened it further. "The offspring will be strong." "There won't be any offspring," I spat, still fighting despite the growing heaviness in my limbs from whatever drug he'd administered. "You're nothing but a psychopath playing make-believe with women's lives." A cold smile spread across Ethan's face. playing make-believe. He reached for a tablet on the nearby counter and held it before my eyes. On the screen was a security video showing a room I hadn't seen before, a large chamber lined with cages. Inside each cage was a woman, their bodies in various states of pregnancy, their abdomens grotesquely distended. 16 vessels before you, Ethan said, his voice clinically detached. Some more compatible than others, some rejecting the implantation, some accepting it, only to have their bodies fail during incubation. He swiped through several screens, revealing detailed medical charts for each woman. Jamie Wilson, nursing student, survived 14 weeks before cerebral hemorrhage. Catherine Mendez, promising candidate until her immune system rejected the embryo. Tessa Banks, her uterine wall tore on day 47. He spoke as if reciting ingredients in a recipe. I stared in horror at the women. Some rocked back and forth, vacant expressions on their gaunt faces. Others lay still, their swollen bellies moving with unnatural rippling movements. One woman, her pregnancy more advanced than the others, had what looked like claw marks visible through her stretched skin, as if something was trying to tear its way out from inside. I stared at the women in their cages, each one in various stages of horrifying transformation, their bodies twisted in ways human anatomy should never bend, bones visibly shifting beneath thinning skin. "What happens to them?" I whispered, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. Ethan's smile widened. "The process is taxing. The human body isn't designed to nurture something so divine." He traced a finger along one of the charts. The longest survival was 14 weeks post-full gestation, most expire during delivery. His clinical tone made the horror worse somehow. The vessel's organs typically fail in sequence. Kidneys first, then liver, then cardiovascular collapse. It's fascinating to document. "This is real," Ethan continued, setting the tablet aside. "As real as the child that will grow inside you. The difference is, you won't fail. Your genetic markers are perfect. The bloodline I've spent decades tracing, the biological compatibility I've been searching for." He stroked my hair almost tenderly. "You will be the mother of a new age." The drug was taking full effect now, making the room spin and my thoughts scatter like leaves in a storm. Through the haze, I saw Ethan prepare another syringe, this one filled with a black, viscous fluid that seemed to move independently within the glass. "The faithful have preserved this bloodline for generations," he explained, tapping the syringe to remove air bubbles. "Hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment, the right conjunction of stars, the right vessel." He looked at me with something like reverence. "That's you, Stacy, the perfect stranger I've waited a lifetime to find." As consciousness began to fade again, I heard Ethan begin chanting in that same ancient language. The last thing I felt was the needle piercing my abdomen, directly into my womb, and a sensation like liquid fire spreading through my core. Days blended into nights. I lost track of time in the cage where Ethan had placed me after the procedure. The chamber of cages was exactly as I'd seen in the video, a large room beneath his apartment, lined with women in various stages of the same nightmare I now inhabited. The cage beside mine held a woman named Rachel. Once a graduate student in astronomy, she'd been there for 6 weeks. Her abdomen was already swollen, moving with unnatural undulations that made me sick to watch. How long have you been here?" I whispered to her during one of the rare moments when Ethan wasn't monitoring us. "I lost track after the first month," she replied, her voice barely audible. "He says I'm special, that my body is accepting the changes." "Changes?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. "Look at Melissa, over there," Rachel said, gesturing weakly to a cage across the room. "She's been here the longest." That's what we all become eventually. I followed her gaze to a woman whose pregnancy had progressed to a horrifying extreme. Her skin had taken on a grayish tint, stretched so thin over her massive abdomen that it appeared translucent. Through it, I could make out shapes moving, not the gentle nudge of a human fetus, but sharp, angular movements like something with claws and spines writhing within her. Even more terrifying were her eyes, completely black now, no whites or irises visible. When she caught me staring, she smiled, revealing teeth that had elongated into points. "He comes," she rasped in a voice that contained multiple tones, as if more than one entity was speaking through her. Moments later, the laboratory door opened, and Ethan entered, pushing a cart of monitoring equipment. He worked methodically, checking each woman's vitals, taking samples, and making notes on his tablet. When he reached my cage, he studied me with clinical detachment. "The implantation was successful," he announced, checking something on his device. "Early cellular division exceeds expectations. Your body is proving highly receptive." "Please," I begged, pressing myself against the bars. "My family will be looking for me. The university will notice I'm missing. You can't keep us all here forever." Ethan's expression didn't change. "Your roommate received a text message from your phone explaining that college wasn't working out, and you decided to return home. Your parents received a similar message saying you decided to stay at school and work through your issues independently." He smiled slightly. "Technology makes disappearances much simpler these days." He moved to the next cage, where Rachel waited. As he opened her cage, I noticed for the first time a strange symbol tattooed on the back of his neck, similar to the ones on the wall, but more intricate, seeming to shift and change when viewed directly. "When will you release us?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Ethan paused, looking genuinely confused. "Release you?" He gestured toward Melissa's cage. "You misunderstand your purpose. You're not temporary vessels to be discarded. You're becoming something greater, mothers to a new species, bridges between this world and what lies beyond." "And what happens when we give birth?" My voice cracked on the last word, unable to fully conceptualize the horror of what might emerge from these unnatural pregnancies. "Most don't survive the birth," Ethan admitted matter-of-factly. "The offspring require significant resources from the host, but those who do survive become something else entirely, something sacred." A cold dread washed over me. "What do you mean?" Ethan's eyes gleamed with fanatical light. "Would you like to see?" Before I could respond, he continued, "It's only fair that you understand the transformation awaiting you. Consider it inspiration." He approached a heavy metal door at the far end of the chamber that I hadn't noticed before. It was inscribed with the same shifting symbols that marked his neck. As he entered a code into a keypad beside it, I heard something move on the other side. A wet, slithering sound, followed by what might have been breathing, but was too arrhythmic, too labored. "She was the first," Ethan said reverently as he unlocked the door. 27 months ago, a perfect implantation, a successful birth, and then transcendence." He entered another code, then pressed his palm against a scanner. As the mechanism whirred, he spoke in that same detached clinical tone. "When I'm not here, I'm Dr. Ethan Mercer, Associate Professor of Evolutionary Biology. I teach 3 classes. I attend faculty meetings. I publish papers on genetic anomalies. I smile at the barista who makes my coffee each morning. I donate to children's charities. I maintain a dating profile but rarely accept invitations." His eyes never left the door as he spoke. No one suspects. No one ever looks beneath the surface. The door swung open, and the stench hit me first. a putrid mixture of decay and chemical preservatives that made my eyes water. Then came the sounds, clearer now, of multiple things moving in different rhythms, of fluid dripping, of something that might have been speech but was too distorted to understand. "Behold," Ethan whispered, stepping aside so I could see into the room beyond. What I saw defied comprehension. The creature had once been human. Parts of a woman's face were still recognizable in the central mass of the abomination. But the body had been transformed beyond recognition, swollen and distorted, with multiple limbs sprouting from unexpected places. The skin was mottled with patches of scales and fur, the torso split open in several places like blooming flowers, revealing orifices from which smaller creatures emerged and retreated, things with too many eyes and limbs that bent in impossible directions. Most horrifying of all, the woman's face in the center of the mass was still conscious, her eyes moving to meet mine, filled with an awareness and agony that transcended human suffering. Around her neck, what remained of it, hung a simple gold necklace with a small cross pendant, a horrifyingly human detail amid the monstrosity. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Ethan breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "The progenitor, the first true success." He approached the creature, stroking one of its limbs with the tenderness of a lover. "This was Jessica. We dated for 11 months. Everyone thought we were the perfect couple. She was studying to be a veterinarian." He smiled at the memory. "Her parents still send me Christmas cards. They think she ran away to South America after our breakup. I send them emails from her account twice a year. I've gotten quite good at mimicking her writing style." From what remained of the woman's mouth came a sound, not words, but a keening wail that seemed to contain all the suffering in the universe. The smaller creatures echoed it, their voices harmonizing into a chorus of pain that resonated in my bones. Then, impossibly, the mouth moved again, and this time, words emerged, distorted but unmistakable. The creature made a gurgling sound, thick fluid bubbling from what remained of its throat. No words, just the horrible wet noise of something drowning in its own fluids. "Beautiful," Ethan whispered reverently. This was the first successful birth. The vessel expired during delivery, of course, her spinal column separated and her ribcage inverted, but the offspring survived. He approached the mass, running his hand along a pulsating section. The flesh parted beneath his touch, revealing glistening organs that shouldn't be exposed to air. The human body isn't meant to survive the process. It's a sacrifice for something greater, like a butterfly shedding its chrysalis. The creature's body convulsed, and I realized with horror that some of the smaller entities were detaching themselves, dropping to the floor with wet, sickening sounds. They resembled nothing I'd ever seen. Part insect, part reptile, with rudimentary human features distorted into nightmarish configurations. "The first generation is imperfect," Ethan explained, watching the creatures scuttle across the floor with fatherly pride. "But they carry the seed. They will find hosts, spread the bloodline, and with each generation, they come closer to the ideal form." One of the creatures approached him, climbing his leg with disturbing intelligence. It reached his hand, and he lifted it, displaying it like a cherished pet. "This one will be ready to leave soon. Perhaps for your former friend Madison. Her conditioning is wearing thin. She's served her purpose. In time, you will fulfill your purpose," Ethan promised, closing the door on the nightmare. "Your genetic markers are perfect. The offspring you bear will be the culmination of my work, the true Antichrist." As he returned to his work, moving on to the next cage, I curled into myself, hands pressed against my still flat abdomen. Beneath my palms, I felt something impossible, a slight fluttering movement, far too early for any normal pregnancy. From the cage next to mine, Rachel watched me with hollow eyes. "It gets worse," she whispered through cracked lips, "when they start to move." I closed my eyes, feeling the unnatural life stir within me. This womb that my father had warned me to keep pure, that I'd protected through years of temptation, would now nurture something monstrous. The perfect stranger had found the perfect vessel, and as the thing inside me shifted again, I knew with sickening clarity that I was looking at my future. That night, as I lay trembling in my cage, I watched Ethan prepare to leave. He stood before a mirror, adjusting his tie, meticulously styling his hair. No trace of the madman remained, just a handsome, well-dressed professional. He sprayed cologne, checked his teeth, and practiced his smile. The transformation was complete. From my cage, I saw a phone screen light up on his desk. He glanced at it and chuckled. "Madison again," he said, showing me the screen. "She's asking if I've seen you. Apparently they're all quite jealous that you left with me." He began typing a response, his fingers moving quickly. "I'm telling her you had a wonderful time and you're sleeping in. Should I add an emoji? Girls use those, right?" He adjusted his watch. The same slender fingers that had just been handling monstrous specimens, now fixing his cufflinks. Through the bars, I could see his phone continuing to light up with notifications. Zoe, Tara, other names I didn't recognize, all asking about him, about me, about whether he was free tonight. "The competition for my attention is quite fierce," he remarked, scrolling through the messages. "Madison slept with the captain of the lacrosse team trying to make me jealous. Tara engineered a casual meeting at the campus coffee shop 6 times last month." He laughed. "They're all so transparent, so desperate. I've dated 3 girls from their social circle. Each one disappeared, and still they line up for their turn." He knelt beside my cage, his face a mask of perfect symmetry and warmth. "Tonight, I have dinner with the dean's daughter. Tomorrow, a gallery opening with a girl from my evolutionary biology seminar." His voice was conversational, as if discussing weekend plans with a friend. "I never lack for candidates. The real challenge is finding one with the right specifications." He reached through the bars, his fingers brushing against my cheek. "That's what makes you special, Stacy. Not your looks or personality. Those are adequate but unremarkable. It's your genetic makeup, the perfect vessel." As he stood to leave, I heard the woman in the cage across from mine begin to scream. The sound was wet, bubbling. I turned to see blood gushing from between her legs, soaking the floor of her cage. Her abdomen rippled violently, the skin stretching and tearing as something pushed against it from within. "Ah, Kathleen's time has come," Ethan said, checking his watch with mild interest. "Sooner than expected. I'd stay to observe, but I mustn't be late for dinner." He walked to the door, pausing only to make a note on his tablet. Behind him, the woman's screams reached a crescendo as her skin split open with a sickening tear. Something dark and glistening began to emerge from the wound, appendages slick with blood grasping at the edges of torn flesh. Ethan didn't even turn around. He straightened his tie one last time, checked his reflection in the glass panel of the door, and left, off to charm another unsuspecting woman while Kathleen's body was torn apart from within. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving us alone with the sounds of Kathleen's death. The thing inside her continued to claw its way out, her screams weakening to gurgles as blood filled her lungs. I pressed my hand against my abdomen, feeling the unnatural movement beneath my skin. In the flickering fluorescent light, I could see veins spreading across my stomach, dark and distended, mapping the corruption growing within me. In the morning, when Ethan returned, he was impeccably dressed in fresh clothes, not a hair out of place. He smiled warmly as he entered, carrying a tray of coffee cups. "Good morning, ladies," he announced to the cages. "Beautiful day outside. Oh, and Kathleen has provided us with a successful birth." He walked past her cage, where her body lay split open from sternum to pelvis, organs displaced and shredded, her face frozen in a rictus of agony. The creature that had emerged was nowhere to be seen. "Our newest arrival is acclimating to the incubation chamber," Ethan explained, noticing my horrified gaze. "And look." He held up his phone, showing a recent text. "The dean's daughter has invited me to her lake house next weekend. Excellent genetics in that family." He checked his watch and sighed. "But first, I have a lecture to deliver on ethical considerations in modern medicine." His laugh was light, pleasant. "The students adore me, you know. My courses always have wait lists." As he turned to leave again, I saw something dark moving beneath his collar, a shadow slithering across his skin before disappearing under his perfectly pressed shirt. And I understood then the full extent of the horror. Ethan wasn't just creating these abominations. He was one of them, wearing human skin, walking among us undetected. The perfect predator. I looked down at my abdomen, which had already begun to swell unnaturally, dark veins spreading across the surface. Within it, something twisted and clawed, already too large, too developed for how little time had passed. My body would be torn apart like Kathleen's, split open for the birth of something monstrous. As he opens the door to leave, I catch one last glimpse of the outside world. Sunshine, blue sky, normal people going about their day, unaware of the horrors beneath the surface. And I know, with sickening clarity, that I'm looking at my future, my insides becoming outsides, my screams fading to gurgles, my body nothing but food for the thing growing inside me, while Ethan smiles his perfect smile and selects his next perfect stranger. Some strangers are perfect for all the wrong reasons. If you enjoyed this tale of occult horror and monstrous birth, please like, share, and subscribe to MD Creepypasta on YouTube for more stories that will make you think twice about who you trust. Remember, the most dangerous monsters aren't the ones being born, but the ones who walk among us wearing human faces.